Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. I'm Mohammad Ahsan, and in this tutorial series we are talking about how to implement a Flutter Marketplace application with Stripe Connect. In the previous video we learned how to configure the Stripe dashboard to enable the connected accounts in your region, and we also saw how we can implement the seller onboarding, just the basics of it. In this video, we are going to complete the seller onboarding by implementing deep links so the user or the seller can go from the application to the Connect onboarding flow and then come back via deep link to the application to have a complete user journey. In this video, we are also going to cover the Stripe checkout API through which we will pay as a customer for products offered by these sellers. And as you know, these video tutorials require a lot of efforts and times, so I would really appreciate it if you can follow me on my social media, if you can like the video, subscribe to the channel if you have not, or if you want to support me, you can support me by buying me a coffee, because I'm on buymeacoffee.com, so you can go there and become a supporter. Now without further ado, let's get into the code. Alright, so the first thing that you need to make sure is that you have checked out the Flutter application, which is the Flutter Stripe Connect, or we call it the Panda Gums application. So once you have checked out, you need to make sure that you are on the branch called part 2, and you do that by doing a git checkout part-2, and then you switch to the part 2 branch. Once you are on it, you can run this on an AVD emulator, which means an Android emulator. And once you have run this, you also need to make sure that you are running the backend project as well. So if you have followed the part 1, you know that Stripe Connect backend is the project that you need to check out, and the link is in the description of this video, of course. Once you have checked it out and followed the instructions from the readme, you need to run the yarn dev command, which will basically spin up the server at localhost 3000. Once you have spin up the server, what you need to do is expose the port 3000 to the Flutter emulator, and you do that by using adb reverse, and then you do a tcp 3000 tcp 3000, and this should basically expose this port to the simulator or the emulator. Now that we have done the initial steps, we need to implement deep linking so we can come back from the browser to the application once the user has finished the registration process as a seller. And we have an official way to do that by Flutter now. So what you need to do is you need to go to Android app source main Android manifest.xml, and here we need to add some things. Just before this intent filter, in the activity tag, we need to add another metadata and another intent filter. The metadata tag that we want to add is called Flutter Deep Linking Enabled, and the value is true. This basically tells Flutter that the deep linking method we are using is the official Flutter method rather than a third-party API. Then we also need to add this intent filter, and notice that the Android scheme defined here is Panda Gums. This is the custom URL scheme that we are going to use for deep linking. And a custom URL scheme is similar to how we use HTTPS or HTTP when going to a web link. For our application, the link is going to be Panda Gums, and the sample links could look like pandagums://deeplinks/some URL. Notice that we have the action.view and the category.default and category.browsable mentioned here, which basically helps us open the application when this URL scheme is hit. Now that we have saved this, we need a full restart of the application in order to make this work. So just restart the application, and then we'll talk about how to test this deep link real quick. Awesome, now that we have the app working, we can go to the Chrome browser, and then we can try navigating to localhost 3000. So I'm going to type the link for you. So it's http localhost 3000, and then we have the register -mobile result equals success. So you need to type this whole URL yourself, and once you do that, you should be able to see our Next.js web project opening this URL. You see the registration completed. This page is what Stripe uses to redirect the user to when the seller onboarding is finished. And from here we should be able to go back to the application. Now this button continue in app has a link, and that link is based on this Panda Gums URL scheme, which means if I click this, this should take us into the application. So let's try this. As you just saw, it quickly opened the application based on the URL scheme. So that's a great news. We just implemented a deep link into the application in just one step. However, it's not just entirely a deep link. We have just specified a URL scheme which opens the application no matter what URL you pass to it. Now what we need to do is to implement a page, or so to say a registration success page, which will be opened when we click the continue in app button. So we basically need a new page that we can open after the registration for the seller has finished. So what we can do is that we can go to lib pages and create a new file here, and then we'll call it register success ... and then we'll paste this code. Now let's have a quick look at what we just did. Specifically, I want you to look at this code. So what we do is that when this register success page will be opened, we basically try to get out the route arguments from this route. You can see that we try to access modal route.offContext and then settings.arguments, which is the arguments passed to this route. Once we extract them, we basically end up extracting the ID from this route args, and we do that here. So what we do is that we say route.args.extras, and then we can call it .account ID. So essentially, when we go from browser to deep link into this page, we should be passing the account ID from the browser to this page. And then once this ID is received here as a route argument, we assign that to the app state. And why do we assign it to the app state? Because we need it in the pay as a customer page, where we right now have this dummy 1234. So when we have a successful registration with a real account ID, then we should see the actual account ID here, because this is also being fetched from the app state. So we set it from one page and then get into it from another page. Now that we have created this page, we basically need to register a deep link listener so we can listen to the deep link and then analyze which page is supposed to be opened and then open this register page. So in order to do so, what we need to do is we need to go to the main .dot file, which is inside lib. And then here we are going to add a couple of things. And before adding any code, we need to install this package from the pub.dev. So you see that this is called uriLinks, and there's a method that it provides, or basically a link stream that it provides that we can listen to. Once we listen to the stream, then we get the URL, which is the deep link URL, and then we identify the URI, and then we basically use that URI to go to the correct page. So first of all, what you need to do is just go here and follow the installing instructions. So what you need to do is you need to run this flutter pub add urilinks. So let's do that real quick. So from the terminal, I'm gonna run flutter pub add urilinks, and now we have basically added this as a dependency. So first of all, we need to import the urilinks package. Then we need to create a variable for the link stream, since we are going to listen to it. So we are going to call it stream subscription. And we are going to import the .async package as well. Now we will create a function that will work with this link subscription. So let's add that. So I'm going to go down here and then add this method. This is going to be called init platform state. And inside here, we are using the uriLinkStream.listen. This is from the urilinks package. So we listen for the deep links. Once we get the URI here, we use the route delegate to parse the route. And we are going to code something there as well. But essentially, this whole stream subscription is assigned to the link subscription, which means that we should be disposing this to avoid any potential memory leaks. And we are going to do that in the dispose method. So we can do a link subscription.cancel in the dispose method. Also, now that we have handled the disposing of the linked subscription, we need to just call this init platform state from the init state method. So let's just call this one. And now we are good to go. Now that we have configured the stream for listening for deep links, we can go ahead and kind of configure a register success path. The first thing that we need to do is to go to the router folder, and inside here we have the pages config.dot. Here you can see that we already have some pages. For example, register path, payout path, home path, etc. We need to create a register success path here as well. So we will call it register success path. And then here we are going to call it register success. And then we are going to add another enum here and we'll call it register success. And then we are going to go down here and then provide another page configuration called register success page config. This is going to be of type page configuration. The key is going to be register success. The path is going to be the register success path, which is this one. And then we have the page actions as well. Now the next thing that we need to do is to go to the routes.parser dart to configure both sides of the parse route information and also the restore route information for the register success path. We'll add another case here beneath the payout path and then we'll call it the register success path. Notice that we are calling the register success page config from here. And then we also need to do this as the same here beneath the pages.home. So we are using pages.register success path, which is the enum. And then we are using route information and then we are passing the register success path, which is the string here. So now that we have set these values as well, we need to go to the router delegate to do some magic. The particular code chunk that we are interested in is all the way down in this file inside the parse route method. You see that we have some logic here already for home. For instance, we replace all the routes by removing them and then just keeping home page. When we go to register, we push another route. For example, when I click here, you see we push it. For payout, we also push it. And for register success, we are also going to push it, but not using the push method because it has a lot of other things going on as well. So we are going to have some custom code here for register success. And this is the custom code that I'm talking about. I'm going to also import this register success page from the pages register success dart file. And look at here what we are doing right now. The register success page, when called for a URI segment, what we'll do is that we'll take out the account ID from the URI query parameters. So imagine that in the browser, we click the continue in app button, which passes the account ID as a deep link to the app. The app comes here to the register success and then takes out the account ID from the deep link URI as a query parameter. It basically assigns that account ID here into the extras and then it creates a new material page route using the register success page. It passes the arguments as register success page config and you see that the register success page config has this extras account ID already assigned. And inside this page, as we already have seen, we take out this account ID here in this code. So we are basically passing it from the router delegate and then accessing it into the register success page itself. Now that we have updated the router delegate as well, we need to go and create another method in the app state. So we are going to go to lib app state and here we have some functions for go to register, go to payout. Similarly, we are going to add another function for go to register success. We're going to add it here. We're going to add it here and you can see that we replace the current action with a page action which says page state.add page and then we provide the register success page config here. This is all part of the router 2.0 which Flutter has introduced recently. Now that we have made all these changes, it's time to actually test the deep link out, which means that we should do something and it should open up this register success page right away. So in order to test this out, if I go to pay as a customer right now, you can see that it says dummy 1234, but we are going to run a command from the terminal and it will result in yet another account ID in this page. So what we'll run is this command. This is adb shell am start. This is all which we set in the Android manifest XML. And then we say pandagums deep links and then we say register success. So we are targeting to go to the register success page and then we pass the account ID to be test deep link 1234. Again, notice that right now we have dummy 1234 and we are passing test deep link 1234. And now if I hit enter, you can see that the register as seller page is open. And if I go back and go to pay as a customer, you can see that now we have the test deep link 1234, which means our deep link is working perfectly fine now. And that is awesome. Alright, we'll now test it with a real account ID. So go to your connected accounts and then whatever account you have completed as a seller, you can go there and then copy the account ID. Then go to the terminal and basically just replace the account ID with the actual account. So I'm going to use this one. And then if I go back and then go to pay as a customer, you see that now we have an actual account ID working, which means that if you follow the seller registration process right now, you will end up with an actual account ID right here. Now let's talk about how do we actually pay for a product, because the seller onboarding is finished. Now we'll talk about how do we use the checkout API for customers who want to pay for products offered by these sellers. So essentially what happens is that the Flutter app will send an API call to our local backend. This local backend will use the Stripe Node.js SDK to hit the Stripe API by calling create checkout session, which should result in a checkout session object back to the local backend. Once we have received the checkout session object from the Stripe API, we send it back to the Flutter application with the session ID. So we essentially send the whole session object back. Once we have received the session ID, then we do some magic there. In the Flutter application, we use a Webview to open an HTML page containing the Stripe Web SDK. And why do we need to do that? Because Flutter itself doesn't have an SDK which uses the checkout API. So essentially what we need to do is we need to create a web view with the HTML page. Inside we use the Stripe Web SDK, which is the JavaScript SDK, by just importing a JavaScript file from Stripe, and then we use the stripe.redirect to checkout method, which essentially requires this session ID. So we use the session ID to pass it to this method, and then Stripe does all the magic, and within the web view it redirects the user to the Stripe checkout page. Once we have finished the payment or we cancel the payment, we automatically close the web view and then we show a toast or a snack bar based on the result. And this is all that I've also explained in my article as well. Now in order to use the web view or to create a web view, what we need to do is to use the Webview Flutter package. And to do that, you can just go to this link and then follow the installation process. And this is the command that essentially we need to run. So we'll go back to our terminal, clear the console, and then run flutter pub add webview_flutter. And then this should install the Webview Flutter package within our project. We need to do a quick restart of the application in order to make sure everything is working. While that's happening, we need to understand how the backend API is working right now. The article right now shows this code where we are using the Stripe Node.js SDK to create the session. Notice that this Stripe SDK requires your Stripe API secret, which you should always provide via a process.env. It also contains an app fee which will be deducted from this transaction. So essentially what happens is that we hit this API, which is localhost 3000 /API/stripe/checkout-session, and then it's a get call. So once we hit this API, we basically provide a couple of information from the Flutter application. So essentially this request.query should have all of this information: the account ID, which is the seller ID, the amount for the product that we are paying, the title of the product we are paying, the currency, either euro or dollar, which is right now in the Flutter application, the quantity of the product, and if this is called from a mobile phone or not. Since we are using the Flutter application, this mobile will be always true. But if we were using the Next.js web application, this parameter would not be provided. Notice that first we create the session using the Stripe checkout sessions create method. In this method, we provide all this magical data. Let's understand what this is. The payment method type is card, which means that as soon as the user is redirected to the checkout page, it is the card information or the card form that we see. The line items array contains objects, and each object specifies its title, its amount, the currency, and the quantity. Since we are only working with one product at a time, we are using only one object here. Notice that we multiply the amount that we receive from the Flutter application by 100 because that's how Stripe intercepts it later on. So let's say if it was $149, then we need to multiply it by 100. And we need to do the same thing for the app fee. If it's $1.23, then we also need to multiply it by 100. The payment intent data is really important because it contains two important things. One, the application fee amount, and this is what will be deducted when the customer pays for a particular product, and this app fee is the commission that you get as a marketplace. Then we have the transfer data, and the destination is set to account ID. This is really important because this tells Stripe that which is the seller the amount is going to go in the end after this transaction. So let's say if you had $1 app fee and you had a $10 worth of a product and the user pays $10, then your app fee will be deducted. The Stripe fee will also be deducted, which the Stripe platform cuts out of the total amount, and what is remaining goes to the seller in the end, or this account ID. Note that the mode we are talking about here is payment, and then we also provide a success URL and a cancel URL. Both of these URL are web pages in our local backend or the Next.js project. And this is going to be called localhost 3000 /pay-out-mobile since we are using the Flutter application, and the result is either going to be success or failure. Now that we understand how the backend code works, we need to update the Stripe backend service so we can call it from the payout page. So essentially, when I go here, or when a customer comes to this page and presses the pay with Stripe button, we should be hitting our backend, which should create a session or a checkout session and send us back the session object. So what we need to do is go to services folder, and inside the Stripe backend service, we need to add a couple of code. The first thing that we will add is the checkout backend URL or the checkout session URL, which basically is this one. So we have Stripe backend service API, which is localhost 3000 /API/Stripe, and then we have the checkout desk session, and then we pass mobile equals true. Notice that this is just a simple API base, but we are also going to provide the information about the product that we are trying to purchase. Now, as we have a function here for create seller account, we also need to create a function which will be used for paying for a particular product. We'll call this method pay for product. Now notice that we have some code here. I'm gonna quickly import this product from the payout.file. And now let's see what we are doing here. See that the URL that we have is being combined with the checkout session URL, plus we are constructing the arguments here or the query parameters here with the account ID and with the information about the product. So you see that we have account_ID as account ID, then we have the amount, which is the product's price, then we have a title, which is product title, and then we have quantity set to 1 hard coded here, then we have the currency, which is the product currency. So if I open, let's say this one with the $149.95, then the currency will be USD, and for this one it's going to be EUR or Euro. Once we have constructed the URL, we basically hit the server with a call with the HTTP GET. We get the response back in this response variable, and once we get that, then we essentially decode it and then return the session object back to its callee. Now let's save this and go to the payout page to use this method. So first of all, what we need to do is to go to pages, and inside here we have the payout, and here if we scroll down, we have some code which is a dummy code right here in the try block. So what we need to do is to call the StripeBackendService pay for product function. In order to do so, what we can type is checkout session response. We'll call it response, and here we are going to say await, and here we are going to say StripeBackendService dot pay for product, and here we need to provide the product and the account ID. So we are going to use products I, which is basically the product in the current index, and the account ID is already something that we have in a variable. I'm going to clean this a bit, and there we go. Once we have got this response, we need to extract out the session ID. For that, we'll create a variable and extract out the ID. So see that we are using response.session, and inside we have the ID, so we are assigning the session ID here. Now that we have the session ID, we will use this ID to open a web view. For that we need to create a new page which will contain the web view. So what you need to do is you need to create a new page, and we'll do that by going to lib pages, and here we are going to create a new dart file and we'll call it checkout.dart, and here we will have some code. Let me quickly explain to you what this code is about. So first of all, what we have here is a bunch of strings containing the checkout success URL, checkout failure URL, and the Stripe public key. Notice that this is not the Stripe secret key, so it is safer to use it in the Flutter application rather than, if it was a secret key, you should always keep that in the backend. Now notice that we have a Stripe HTML page scaffold string here, which is just a dummy HTML page with some styling and just a text that says please wait. Once we have constructed this HTML page, what we do here is that we use the web view, which is from the Flutter Webview or Webview Flutter package, and then this is the body of this page or this whole material route. So you see that we have the web view. In this web view we have the initial URL, and the initial URL is basically this one. So you see that we basically take that whole HTML string, we convert that into base64, and then we provide the web view this URL so it opens it as an HTML page. Once we have opened this web view, then once we have finished loading the page, we check that if the URL is the initial URL, because it might go to the Stripe page as well and multiple other pages as well. But if it's the initial URL, which means if it's our HTML page that we have loaded, then we call this method, which is redirect to Stripe. Now here we call this stripe.redirect to checkout method with the session ID passed to this widget along with the Stripe key. Now where does this Stripe method or this Stripe method come from? Notice that in the HTML we are using this script tag which is loading the Stripe Web SDK or the Stripe JavaScript SDK. So by the time we call this method, we already have the Stripe variable in the global scope because we have loaded the Web SDK. And once we basically call this function, we provide the session ID, and then this function redirects the user to the correct Stripe checkout page. And that's what we are going to do. Finally, one important code here to understand is the navigation delegate callback. This basically intercepts each request that's happening in the web view. We check if Stripe has redirected the user to checkout success URL, then we basically go back with passing this success as a string. So we basically do a pop from this route stack. If Stripe has redirected the user to the checkout failure URL, in that case we also do a navigator of pop, but with cancel passing as a parameter. So essentially these parameters will be passed from the page this route is opened from. So now that we have created this page, we need to open it from the payout page. So we are going to go back to the payout.dart, and here once we have got the session ID, we need to create a new page for the checkout page. So essentially what we need to do is to paste some code here, and I'm going to explain to you what's happening here. So essentially I'm going to import this checkout page here and then see what's happening. We have this session ID received as a route parameter, and then we create a new material page route here with checkout page passing the session ID. So this is the session ID that we have received from the local backend, essentially from the Stripe API. And once we get the session ID, we use the material page route to create another route and push it into the navigator of context, which means we open a new page by passing the session ID. Once we have passed this, then we are on the checkout page. Then once we have popped back from there, we check what is the value provided, and this is basically linked to this part. When we do a navigator of pop, we pass success from here, and then we are checking here in this then callback, hey, if success was passed or if cancel was passed. And you can see that we pass success and cancel here. Now in case of success, we just show a snack bar which says payment successful. if we have cancel as the case, then we show an error snack bar which says payment cancelled or failed or something like that. One more thing that we need to do is, before we basically use this future.delayed, we need to use pd.close to make sure that this progress dialog is closed or is hidden after we've got the response ID. And now that we have everything in place, we need to test the payments as a customer. Right now, if I go to this page, you see that the account ID is dummy1234, which means that this will potentially not work. So what we need to do is to run the adb shell command with an actual account ID. And once we do so, we should be able to see the register as seller success page or the message. And then for some reason, if you're already on the pay as customer, this doesn't update right away. But if you go back and come back again, you should be able to see that. I'm not sure why that happens. But now that you have the account ID in place, you can click this button. It sends a call to the local backend, then gets the session ID, then opens this web view. We already saw the please wait message, which is coming from here in this HTML. And now we see the checkout page with the product details. You see the title here, you see the amount here, and we are good to pay for the product. Now, if I go back, this will consider this as a payment cancelled, and you see the snack bar here. Now let's try this product, which is in euros. So if I open this with Stripe, this will take us to the Stripe checkout with the correct information, and you will see what that is. Now you can see that the title is accurate and also the amount is in euros. Now I need to put some information here. The email that we need to provide can be a dummy email. So I can say someone@test.com. For the credit card information, Flutter basically recommends you to use this card number, which is 424242 all the way, and then any future date. So I use a 424, and then any CVC. So I'm going to use 424, and then we need to provide the name on the card. So I could basically call this guy a someone test, and then we can just pay for the product. So if I hit pay, this will basically execute the transaction in the test mode. And once this is completed, you can see that the payment is successful, and we show the message as well, which means the whole payment flow is now working in both cases. If we cancel it, we see the snack bar with the failure message, and if it is finished successfully, then we also go back to the application and we show the snack bar. Now, how is this working? As we discussed before, in the checkout page, we are listening to where the user is redirected after the payment. Is the user redirected to failure or success? And as soon as that happens, we basically navigate back from the web view page to this pay as customer page, and then we show a message based on the value provided in the pop function. So we either show a successful or payment failed or cancelled message, and that's how it's working. Now that we have finished a successful transaction, let's see our Stripe dashboard to see if this seller got any amount or not. So I'm going to make sure that I'm using the test data, and if I go to connected accounts, you can see that here this user has now some balance, which is 329 euros. If I open this, you can see that the amount that I see here is in SEK, because my original account is in SEK, or the seller's account is in SEK or Swedish kronors. And you can see that if we have a successful payment, that should essentially show here. And then if the payouts are daily for this seller, then they will be paid out eventually daily or based on whatever the setting there is. Amazing, right? We were able to implement the registration of the seller as well, and we are now able to pay as a customer for products within this marketplace as well. And that brings us to the end of this tutorial. Alright, so I hope that you liked the video and learned a lot from it. Let me know in the comments how you feel about this video. What did you learn? What was the best part of this tutorial series? Or if you want to tell me something, just write in the comments and I'll make sure to heart it out. If you want to support me, you can support me at buymeacoffee.com, or you could just press that thumbs up button to like the video and subscribe to the channel to have the channel grow. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and happy coding, and I'm gonna see you in the next video.